Hi everyone. So this will be my first video with our PowerPoint. Some of you wanted a video explain a little bit of the content, so here we go. So the first part of what you should be working for in Lumen and the PowerPoint under our first module talks about the properties of life. And what that's comparing is what does biology and science consider a living thing and a non-living thing. Now, in our meeting, I talked about a pet rock, which obviously is not alive, but a dog is, right? And algae is, and a bacteria is, and all these other organisms are considered alive. Well, why? Why do we know this? Well, scientists like to classify things. They're always asking why rather than giving an answer and going with it. So if you're the student or the kid that always went, but why? That's a good thing. So in order to be considered life, it says properties of life, you have to share these 7 things. If you have all of these 7 things together, biology says you're considered a living organism. Because what if it's a new bacteria that comes out? We want to know if it's considered alive or not, and it can do damage to us. So it would have to do all these things. Well, what are these things? So order means the order of the organism. So humans are ordered to 2 legs off the bottom of their body, 2 arms off the side, sets of fingers on the end of their hands rather than on their ankles or their elbows. So that's a certain order. But also inside of us, our heart is in our chest for a reason and order. Our lungs are in the lower part of our chest for a reason. So that's all order. A bacteria, although very small, and a virus small, they also have order on the inside of them. So if you fit into this, think about a plant. It has like a tree, a trunk, and then branches off of it. That's a certain order. So that's considered alive. The next one is response or sensitive to the environment. That can be heat, it could be acid, it could be sunlight, a response to the environment. So if you put your plant out in the hot sun all the time and never water, it's going to die. That's a response to the environment. If you put us out in the hot sun like today, all day long with no water, we're going to feel like we're dying. So that's a response to the environment. I know in class or in our meeting, I said poke a bear, you know it's going to respond, you know it's alive. Reproduction means that the organism can reproduce, whether sexually with a male and female or asexually by itself, like a starfish. You chop off a leg, that's another starfish that grows. Or like a sponge that does budding, where like SpongeBob can make copies of himself. So all of that's considered reproduction. Growth and development means that you started as some sort of infant stage and went into an adult stage. Think of a pupa for a butterfly, growing in its cocoon and then turning into a butterfly. That's growth and development. The organism is growing and it's developing and getting stronger and getting more mature on the way, just like humans and babies. Regulation means that the body can regulate itself, whether for temperatures, like we sweat when it's hot, we shiver when it's cold. That would be a type of regulation. But digestion is regulation, the way your blood works and clearing toxins is regulation. The next one's homeostasis. Think about your body when you're trying to stay in balance. If you don't sweat when you're hot, you'll go into heat stroke and die. So that would not be a good balance, right? If you freeze to death, that would also not be a good balance. So that's called homeostasis. And there's many things in your body that help keep you in balance, like your acid and your alkaline. So if your body is not neutral and you're a little more acidic in your blood, you're going to cause organisms like strep throat or other things to invade because you're not in balance. You don't have homeostasis. The last one is energy processing, which means how do we get energy in our body? We eat food because we need that energy food gives. Plants need the sun because they need the energy that they get from that. So that's called an energy process, or how you eat. Plants eat one way, we eat another way, but it's all for energy. So if you do all these 7 things, biology says that you're alive. They're the properties of life. If you don't, you're considered dead like a pet rock. So you have pictures that go through examples of all of this as I move quickly through, because I want to make a short video. When we get further along, not only do we have life, but the organization of life. So life is organized from big to small and small to big. Think of your own body. Your own body here, we have a body with organs in it. Well, the organs are organized in a way, right? So you need your esophagus, your food tube, to attach to your stomach, and your liver and your pancreas. It's all digestive system. There's a reason for that. And then that digestive system is made out of cells and tissues. So we go to tissue from your stomach. So we took a slice of your stomach, it would look like this. If we looked at the cells in the stomach, we would look like this. And they are all organized together. In those cells, there's actually tiny little organs that make them up. Those little organs are called organelles. But this is how life is organized. And it starts from the biggest on the biosphere. Bio means life, sphere means circle. So the earth is literally a life circle. And then we look at the ecosystems on the earth, which are deserts and tundra and deciduous forests and that sort of thing. And then we pick one type of forest to look at, one community inside of that, one person in that, the tissues in it, the cells in it that make them up. So this is how life is organized in a lot of living things. There's hierarchy. It's structured in a certain way. We can get smaller than these cells and the little organs that are in them. Those are called atoms. So even going smaller, science knows that these atoms, now this is a DNA molecule, and these are all the molecules or atoms that make it up. So atoms are the unit of matter, the unit of what makes us up. So if you take our body, go to organ systems, to an organ, to the heart tissue, to a heart cell, down, what makes up a heart cell? Well, calcium does, and potassium does. All of these are elements that are atoms that make up everything. So an atom is a unit of matter, unit of us. Now, if you want to find the smallest unit that's living, an atom isn't living, the smallest unit that's living, that's a cell. So atoms form molecules, which is just a molecule. It's many atoms together. And all these molecules help us with biological important things. So this says biologically important macromolecules. Macro means big. So macromolecules, you've heard of these all the time in nutrition, but atoms make macromolecules that help biology, which helps living in us. So some of these macromolecules, proteins, you use them for animal meats and legumes and nuts. Carbohydrates, which is our sugars, our starches, and that sort of thing. We also have DNA and RNA, which is a macromolecule. So these are all macromolecules. And we also have lipids. A lipid is a fat, whether it's butter, animal fat, or oils from plants. Those are all lipids. Steroids are lipids. Steroids like this, but also steroids that make us male and female. So all of those are macromolecules. They're biologically important. They're important for biology, important for life, and they're made out of atoms. So there's that building back and forth again. If I skip down some more and we look at a cell, so if we're made out of atoms that make molecules, that make cells, that make tissues, that make organs, that make us, well, what is a cell? So a cell is always that circular thing, right? And on the outside of a cell, think of a cell as a water balloon. The actual balloon is called the plasma membrane. It's the membrane that holds that balloon together. The cytoplasm is the jelly inside of the cell. So if we're looking at a water balloon is the plasma membrane, and the water inside is the cytoplasm. Now, if we were to put beads inside this water balloon, so beads were inside the water in this balloon, those beads are organelles. They're tiny organs. And the DNA is in there as well. So a ribosome is a tiny dot that helps make protein for the cell, which make proteins for the body. Remember, it builds. Those are all inside this cell. They're like beads in that water balloon. So there's a couple types of cells. One is called a prokaryotic cell. Pro means before, karyotic is nucleus. So before a nucleus, and a nucleus has our DNA. So if we don't have nucleus, we don't have DNA. We can't tell if we're a dog or a human or a giraffe or a plant. We can't tell if we have genetic diseases or issues or things to inherit. So DNA is important. So these cells came before life. When the earth was still a molten, hot gas, toxic place, an asteroid came, scientists believe, that had bacteria on it, and that was the first life that was here on our planet billions of years ago. And those were called prokaryotic cells. What they think is that these two prokaryotic cells, these two bacteria, one ate each other and made a eukaryotic cell. Eukaryotic, let me get down here, is here. This stands for eukaryotic. This is with a nucleus. All of our cells are eukaryotic. They all have nucleus in it. Bacteria, back up here, that usually look like this, they don't have a nucleus. What they have is this big ball of string, and the string is called a nucleoid. The nucleoid has genetic material, so this bacteria can multiply like a stomach bug, multiply very fast in your belly. That means cell and cell and cell and cell, and then you're throwing up. So this can copy itself, but it doesn't have the DNA like us. It also has no membrane-bound organelle. So remember, the cell is like a water balloon, has a membrane around called a plasma membrane or cell membrane. Well, these little dots are ribosomes, and these don't have an extra membrane around them. In our cells, in our eukaryotic, all the organs inside like this all have extra membranes around, extra protection. Now this long tail right here is called a flagellum, and that helps for movement. Pili, which are these little polka dot things, are like a centipede with a million legs. So cells can move with pili like this, or they have a whippy motion like a tail on a boat. It works like a propeller. And that's how they move. This is why you have the stomach bug so quickly within hours to 24 hours. Bacteria multiply fast and they move fast, which of course anybody knows is not fun. So eukaryotic cells are usually bigger. So our cells under a microscope are bigger than a bacteria. So eukaryotic are bigger than prokaryotic. They have a nucleus. That means the DNA inside isn't like string. It has a membrane around it to protect it, like a fort in a bank. Has other membrane organelles. We get into cell later, but all the little organs inside also have membranes around them. Here's some relative sizes of cells, plant cells. Here's some lipids. These are fats that make up our body. Here's a chicken egg, an ostrich egg. It just shows us relative size. If you're interested in biology, biology is study of life, but what kind of life? So if you went to paleontology, paleo is talking about fossils, so you're studying fossils. Molecular biology is studying biology itself on molecule level. So you're looking at those proteins and those carbohydrates and how they react with biology. That's all you're looking at. Microbiology is looking at very tiny things like bacteria and viruses, and that's all they study. Neurobiology, neuro meaning the brain, so it's a nervous system. Zoology, think a zoo, right? That's studying animals. Botany is plants, genetics is genes. So there's lots of areas of biology. It's a very big field. It's not just one field. We have a couple minutes left. When we get into science, it talks about inquiry, asking questions, learning, but why? So within that why system, science needs to have structure. So if you're a scientist, you can't just go, I thought I saw a squirrel. It's like my favorite comment now. And let's say you thought you saw one, it sounds like opinion, right? So in science, it's fact. So how do you prove a fact or talk about facts? Well, that's called the scientific method. In the scientific method, they're calling it scientific inquiry here, but scientific method means you make a hypothesis and it must be testable. So you make a hypothesis and you say, my phone is dead. That's your hypothesis. How are you going to test it? You do an experiment. I'm going to plug it in the wall. It is still dead. You're going to look at your other experimental variables. Is the cord not working? Is the charger box not working? Is the battery on the phone not working? What is going on? So these are a way of the scientific method that we do every day. We make a hypothesis, my phone is broken, and then you do an experiment. Is it the battery internally? Is it the cord? And you do these experiments. Cord, nope, doesn't work. Charger box, nope, doesn't work. And then you get results. My phone is broke, gotta go to Verizon. So we do science all the time. But when we apply this to something sciencey sounding, that's when we get confused. So maybe you want to test out a new vaccine for COVID. I found a vaccine for COVID. It's bleach. It's really not. And now I'm going to test it. I'm going to test it on animals and plants and people. Those would be all your variables. Testing who responds to it. And then you interpret results. Killed everybody. Bleach is not a good vaccine. So this is what science does in order to prove fact. And that's what science wants to do. They don't want a lot of opinions out there. So the next part is evolution. So why don't I do another video on that so you have time to take a break. I'll be back.